man's age-old dream of flight becomes a reality.
"12 seconds. That's how long the first successful powered flight lasted. It traveled 120 feet, less than the wingspan of this. This is the Boeing 747, the jumbo jet. It carries over 400 people at 600 miles per hour for 7,000 miles without stopping. It has lounges, bars, and sometimes even bedrooms. How did we get from a fragile kite made of wood and canvas to a 400-ton flying city? This isn't just a story of better engines or bigger wings. It's a story of catastrophic failures that made flying safer, bitter rivalries that pushed technology to its limits, and a colossal gamble that accidentally shrank the world. This is the unseen evolution of the machine that defines our modern age, the passenger airliner. After the Wright brothers proved it was possible, the world went crazy for flying. But let's be clear, flying in the 1910s and 20s was not a pleasant experience. The first passenger planes were often converted World War I bombers. You weren't sitting in a comfortable cabin. You were often in an open cockpit exposed to the elements. It was deafeningly loud, bone-rattlingly bumpy, and absolutely freezing. You needed a leather helmet, goggles, and a heavy coat. Air sickness bags were essential, and so was bravery. These early aircraft were notoriously unreliable and dangerous. But for the first time in history, you could have breakfast in London and a very late lunch in Paris. The seed was planted. The first true revolution in passenger comfort and viability came in the 1930s with two American legends. First, the Ford Trimotor. Nicknamed the Tin Goose, it was a rugged, all-metal aircraft with three powerful engines. Crucially, it had an enclosed cabin. It was still incredibly noisy. People said it was like being inside a tin can being beaten with hammers, but it was a huge step up. But the true game changer, the aircraft that proved passenger air travel could be a reliable and even profitable business, was the Douglas DC-3. Introduced in 1936, the DC-3 was a masterpiece of design. It was fast, it had a decent range, and it was incredibly reliable. But its real genius was its economics. It was one of the first planes that could make a profit by just carrying passengers without needing to rely on government mail subsidies. The DC-3 made air travel a real industry. By the start of World War II, it carried over 90% of America's air traffic. It was the undisputed king of the skies. But the war that it helped fight would soon make it obsolete by unleashing the jet engine. World War II accelerated aviation technology at a breathtaking pace. Piston engines became more powerful, aircraft got bigger, and for the first time they were pressurized, allowing them to fly high above the weather where the air is smooth. But the biggest leap was the jet engine. It was a quantum leap in speed and power. After the war, every aircraft designer knew jets were the future. The only question was, who would get there first? The answer came from Britain. The de Havilland Company, builders of the famed Mosquito bomber, designed the world's first jet-powered airliner, the Comet. When the Comet entered service in 1952, it felt like science fiction. It was whisper quiet compared to the roaring piston planes. It flew at nearly 500 miles per hour, almost twice as fast as the competition, and its high altitude meant a vibration-free ride. It was pure glamour. Passengers dressed up. The Queen of England flew on it. It was a symbol of a new, optimistic post-war era. But then, tragedy. Just a year into service, a comet fell out of the sky near Calcutta. Then, in 1954, two more comets disintegrated in mid-air over the Mediterranean. The world was horrified. The entire comet fleet was grounded. Investigators launched one of the most extensive and difficult accident investigations in history. They painstakingly recovered wreckage from the seafloor and reassembled the aircraft. What they found changed aviation forever. The problem wasn't the engines or the pilots, it was the windows. The comet's windows were square. The repeated cycle of pressurizing the cabin at high altitude and depressurizing on descent created immense stress on the aircraft's metal skin. The stress concentrated at the sharp corners of the square windows, eventually causing microscopic cracks to form. After thousands of cycles, these teeny tiny cracks would suddenly, explosively rip open. The result was catastrophic metal fatigue. It was a brutal, tragic lesson learned at the cost of many lives. But because of it, every single airliner today has round or oval windows to distribute that stress evenly. The comet's failure made every future flight safer. The comet disaster, while tragic, left the door open wide for the Americans. The two giants, Boeing and Douglas, were locked in a race to build America's first successful jetliner. Boeing, based in Seattle, had a secret weapon. They'd been building jet bombers for the United States Air Force, like the B-47 and the B-52. They had invaluable experience with jet engines and swept-wing designs. The company's president, Bill Allen, made a colossal bet. He risked the entire company, spending $16 million of their own money, a quarter of their company's net worth at the time, to build a prototype. It was called the Dash 80. The Dash 80 would become the Boeing 707. Douglas, based in California, was the industry leader. Their DC series of planes dominated the skies. They were more cautious. They waited for airlines to place orders before they started building. But Boeing had a head start and a flair for the dramatic. During a demonstration flight for airline executives over Lake Washington, test pilot Tex Johnson, in a completely unplanned move, performed two slow, graceful barrel rolls in the massive Dash 80 prototype. His boss was furious, but the airline executives were stunned and impressed. The stunt showed off the jet's incredible strength and handling. Pan Am World Airways, led by the legendary Juan Trippe, placed a huge order for both the Boeing 707 and the competing DC-8. The jet age had truly begun. These planes transformed global travel. Suddenly, crossing the Atlantic wasn't a 12-hour ordeal, it was a 6-hour flight. New York to Los Angeles was a day trip. The world felt smaller, faster, more connected. The era of mass air travel was dawning, but it needed one more giant leap. By the mid-1960s, the jet age was a victim of its own success. Airports were becoming hopelessly congested. With 707s and DC-8s, Pan Am's Juan Trippe had a new, audacious vision. He didn't just want a slightly bigger plane. He wanted a plane that would shatter all previous conceptions of size. He wanted a jumbo jet. He went to Boeing's Bill Allen and essentially challenged him to build it. The requirement? A plane that could carry more than double the passengers of a 707, fly just as fast, and do it at a lower cost per seat. But the 747 we know and love wasn't originally supposed to be a passenger plane for the long haul. At the time, everyone believed the future of long-distance travel was supersonic transport, or the SST. Boeing was actually developing their own SST, the 2707. They believed the 747 would have a short life as a passenger plane before being relegated to carrying cargo. This belief had a profound and ultimately brilliant impact on its design. To make it an efficient cargo plane, it needed to be able to load from the nose. So the designers, led by the legendary Joe Sutter, decided to place the cockpit above the main deck. This created the 747's most iconic feature, that famous hump. It was designed so a large cargo door could be fitted to the nose. As a passenger plane, airlines initially turned this unique space into a first-class lounge or bar, making it the most exclusive real estate in the sky. Building the 747 was one of the greatest industrial undertakings in history. Boeing had to build an entirely new factory in Everett, Washington, a building so large it's still the biggest in the world by volume. The company went into massive debt. The new high-bypass turbofan engines, which were key to the plane's efficiency, had teething problems. The project was behind schedule and wildly over budget. Boeing was once again on the verge of bankruptcy. The entire fate of the company rested on this one giant plane. The team that built it became known as the Incredibles. On January 22, 1970, the first Pan Am Boeing 747 flew from New York to London. It was here. It was real. And what about the supersonic jets it was supposed to make way for? Well, the Boeing SST project was cancelled due to environmental concerns and cost. Just for the rich. It opened up the world to the middle class. Mass tourism, international business, the ability to visit family on the other side of the globe. So much of our modern and interconnected world was made possible by the economics of this one aircraft. It truly became the queen of the skies. From a 12-second hop on a beach to a 400-person city in the sky, the evolution of the passenger airliner is a story of incredible ambition. It teaches us that progress isn't a straight line. It's built on trial and error, on devastating failures that teach us how to be better, and on audacious bets that sometimes, against all odds, change the world. So, here's a thought for you. The next time you're on a flight, looking out that little round window, remember the story of how it got that shape, and think about where you're going, and how impossible that journey would have been just a few generations ago. My question for you is this: what was the most memorable or game-changing flight you've ever taken? Not just the destination, but the flight itself. Was it your first time on a jumbo jet? Your first international trip? Share that story with us in the comments. The journey is often just as important as the destination. Until next time, keep looking up. The history written in the skies is vaster than you can imagine. Thanks for flying with Unseen.